Don't you hate how people improve? Putting in effort, gathering skills, and then using them to their advantage? Getting good, if you will. I mean, look at this. Depth charging, an advanced maneuver. They relies on understanding the grenade's mechanics, common defender locations, and good intel on where to attack. Players using an old mechanic in a new and creative way? Clearly, this was a problem. Fortunately, the people who own the rights to Tom Clancy's name agreed. They felt grenades were too powerful and needed to be brought back in line. So they decided to increase damage through surfaces. This way, you can still use them to destroy utility from below, while not outright killing defenders just because they're in the wrong spot at the wrong time. Oh wait, no they didn't. They removed the ability to cook grenades altogether, massively nerfing their killing potential while simultaneously kneecapping the skill ceiling by removing any techniques the player base has discovered. On the bright side though, at least we can give them to more operators, like IQ. Except no, because Ubisoft preemptively nerfed her before we even knew what effect the frag grenades would have, nerfing the only good gun she had left by lowering the damage and increasing the recoil. They say they want to make the extended barrel combo weaker on her, but if that's the case, then why not take away the extended barrel specifically from her? That way Grim, who's struggling, can still use it and doesn't become the victim of collateral damage, which you literally acknowledge is something you are doing. Balancing is a critical part of any game. Unfortunately, the Ubisoft offices are covered in the tastiest of lead-based paints. It's become a meme in the community at this point that Ubisoft only ever nerfs things. For about the last 4 years now, almost every major balancing change has been nerfs. And these changes have also been the cause of many of the game's issues. Going back to 2020 and Year 4 Season 4, this was the season where it felt like the balancing really started going in the wrong direction. This was the height of the utility meta. Basically, defenders would bring an insane amount of bulletproof util, like Valk, Wamai, and especially Goyo, bringing a whole arsenal of deployable shields. And to counter this, the attackers would bring a whole arsenal of explosives. And to counter the counter, defenders would pick Jaeger over 90% of the time. Jaeger was indisputably the best defender in the game. He had a solid gun, the most impactful gadget in the game, and an extensive knowledge of trains.
Oh my god! Woo!
Each ADS could catch 2 projectiles, and there was no delay between them firing. This meant, if you were staring at a shield and you only had one set of frags, you're just kind of fucked. In an attempt to de-orbit Jaeger's pick rate, Ubisoft chose to nerf his gun, going from 43 damage to 38. And while yeah, Jaeger had a good gun, the main contributor to his insane pick rate was the gadget that was at the center of the entire meta.
You guys are terrible, bro.
This update was also when they really started trying to slow the game down, making the aim down sight speed slower across the board. This was a mistake because not only did it set in motion the endless parade of nerfs to come, but at the time it hurt attackers more than defenders. That's because the attackers more often have to swing when trying to enter, whereas defenders can just hold angles posted up behind a border wall of shields. This change would also result in a massive surge in angle grip usage. This is because, surprisingly, players still wanted to aim down sights fast. But I'm sure nerfing something popular resulting in the massive and uncontrollable rise in the popularity of something else won't become a trend moving forward. In the next season, Jaeger became a 2-speed. Once again, missing the fucking point. They also took away Buck's frag grenades. This meant the attackers were down a set of frags, which made it harder for them to remove utility. They wanted to differentiate him from Sledge, and they did do that by just making him the objectively worst choice. They also made the brilliant decision to give Ying a 4th Candela and smoke grenades. Why would they do this? Well,
god damn it, why don't you guys ever fucking pick war?
But all this did was make Jaeger even more necessary because there was even more shit being thrown at the defense. The next season she went back down to 3 because what the fuck were they thinking? Melusi was also added this season, bringing even more bulletproof utility. Honestly, the worst change from this season was updating House to the better version. Who wanted this? Like, yeah, the original was a disaster, but that's why it was fun and why it was in casual only. This trend of killing fun would continue into the next season with the Tachanka rework. They desired to make everything viable, but Tachanka was a pillar of the community. Lord Tachanka ascended the political spectrum. Is it really so bad to have elements of your game that are just goofy and fun, like Tachanka or House? To this day, Tachanka still performs horribly, but he's no longer the Lord, and the game really lost something special with that. They also realized that they needed to curb Melusi because her wub-wubs were way too strong. Naturally, to address this issue, they traded her T5 for Oryx's MP5. Once again, completely failing to realize that the issue is the overpowered gadget. It's like blaming me for drunk driving when she was the one who ran the green light. Year 5, Season 4, Ubisoft officially declared a war on drugs. I meant the utility meta. whatever, I'm sure both of them will end well. The first step was to finally nerf Jaeger's gadget. His ADSs can now only catch one projectile every 10 seconds. Along with this, Wamai went down to 4 magnets, and they removed his shield and Valk's shield. Zero lost his frag grenades despite being the most balanced attacker at the time. We are confident he will continue to perform well. You sure about that one? They gave his frag grenades to Dokkaebi, who's gotten and lost them about like 100 times over the years. It's just like me and my will to live. And Ash lost her flashbangs, but she gained a 3rd breaching round. This update, I'd say they were moving in the right direction. Some of the finer details were less agreeable, but it's a noble goal to keep the streets safe. I mean, fix the meta. Moving on to the mid-season, the next step in the war on util was naturally to reduce the size of Ash and Sophia's explosions. A little strange, but they were probably just trying to make room for the Gaunt 6, which they were about to add next season.
Huh?
I'm sure Ubisoft buffing something and then almost immediately backtracking on it won't also become a trend. This was also when they started getting weird about the 1.5, removing it from Legion and Mira without giving it to anyone. They also decided to give Buck some shotgun ammo and hard breach charges. You know, after the better part of a year from him losing his frag grenades. Introduce the Gaunt 6. Good idea. Give it to Dokkaebi and Fink at the cost of their frag grenades. Bad idea. I would much rather have a machine pistol and frag grenades over one tiny explosion and flashbang. This was the update that finally broke Jaeger. They nerfed his gun again by massively upping the recoil and dropping the capacity to 25+1. Jaeger's pick rate would finally fall, not because they ever correctly addressed the issue of his gadget being too strong, but because they made his gun so unbearably bad, no one wanted to use it. They created a weird situation where everyone wants Jaeger on their team, but nobody wants to actually play Jaeger. They doubled down on the weird mag capacity change, making Jackal C70 25+1 and also do less damage. Again, the issue is the gadget. It's extremely oppressive and very annoying. Defenders really don't give a shit what gun he has. But Tachanka did get a bunch of buffs. Turns out destroying the community's messiah may not have been the best decision. After sending Jaeger on a Siberian vacation,
Grenades for you, Mason! Not for me!
the utility meta finally began to wind down. However, after a successful campaign, Ubisoft got a taste for power, and now they wanted full control. Anything the players gravitate towards is now viewed as a threat to the state. Nothing is allowed to be good without Dear Leader's express permission. They went mad with power, making changes basically arbitrarily, adding and taking away seemingly at random, and slowly eroding confidence in the state. Their first declaration was for Ash to lose a breaching round and get worse recoil. I thought they were trying to make it easier for attackers to get rid of utility, and she just got that breaching round 2 seasons ago, but now they're going back on it. So now Ash has 2 breaching rounds with no flashes and worse recoil on top of that. Vigil also got more recoil as punishment for trying to flee from Dear Leader. And around this time, a single neuron deep in Ubisoft's collective brain fired, and they remembered that nerfing someone's gun doesn't actually fix an overpowered gadget, so they made Malusi's wubs able to be shot. And now it's time to redistribute the wealth. To start, they moved the 1.5 from Frost to Alibi. I'm sure they won't go back on this. Tachanka got more subsidies as a desperate attempt to lift him out of poverty. Naturally, the bourgeoisie will pay for this, so Sophia's gun got completely ass-fucked, making it one of the worst in the game. But I'm sure this won't lead to any unforeseen consequences down the line. After putting Ash and Sophia in their place, that left Sledge and Iona to become the most popular attackers in the game, and that meant it was their turn to get nerfed, losing the SMG-11 and Scopes respectively. What are they trying to accomplish at this point? I'm seriously asking that. They admitted themselves in the patch notes they expected them to become more popular after the nerfs. They're in this position not because they got better, but because everyone else around them got worse. They nerf Ash and Sophia, take away frags from Buck, Zero, Doke, and Finka. Yeah, no shit, people are going to start using them more. And I think someone on the team realized this too because they decided to give Finka back her frag grenades. I understand they want the operators to have a more even pick rate, for everyone to be equal. But what they don't seem to understand is that some operators like Ash, Zoe, or Sledge have an essential role in the team. Break shit. People aren't going to suddenly start picking Monty or Callie just because you punish anyone with a high pick rate. They have a high pick rate for a reason. You need to give players a reason to use the underpicked operators. Make them more enticing. What are those things called? They also nerfed the AK-12. I thought the point of giving Ace a good gun was to try to entice people to bring along his utility. Why give it to him in the first place if you're just going to end up nerfing it a few seasons later? This also hurt Fuse, but collateral damage is kind of his thing.
God's plants. Oh no. Damn it.
But at least now the utility meta has been conquered, so Wamai can get a few of his frisbees back, going from 4 to 6. However, not content with lowering only the attacker's firepower, they decided to nerf the MX4 and the Roni. Why? You just gave the MX4 the 1.5 in the previous season, and now they're all fucking, whoopsie, the player base really liked that, can't have that. What exactly is wrong with having good guns? This thought process continued into the next season when the Glorious Revolution reached new heights by nerfing almost every single operator in the game by reducing the angle grip speed by 20%. They outright said they knew the player base wouldn't like this change. But we here at Ubisoft, we know what's best for you. Now please, buy another generic uninspired open world. This change made no sense. They made the ADS speed slower, so people responded by switching to the angle grip. This clearly shows people like faster ADS speed. The reason not as many people were using the vertical grip is because over time the player base has gotten better, and they no longer need the assistance provided by the vertical grip. But what exactly is wrong with that? More experienced players can take advantage of the angle grip for faster ADS speed, while players who might be struggling with recoil can use the vertical grip. And once they get better at the game, they can take advantage of the angle grip. But once again, people are playing the game the wrong way, and they need to be punished for that. Another 1 million to the gulag. I'm sure that making every rifle and SMG slower and clunkier won't have any unforeseen negative consequences for the game. The LMG meta had officially begun. LMGs were always seen as meme weapons because they were always too slow and clunky. ARs were much faster, but following Year 6 Season 4, assault rifles were only slightly faster than LMGs. But this could always be improved on ARs by using the angle grip. Oh wait, so now we were in a situation where LMGs were about on par for speed with ARs, but with enormous magazines and zero recoil. But luckily, only a few operators actually had access to LMGs. It would be a real shame if they just fixed a critical flaw with one of these operators, skyrocketing them into the meta. Finka was the antithesis of everything the Glorious Revolution worked so hard to achieve. She had a stupid amount of destructive power with 3 explosives between 2 frags and a Gone 6, an easy-to-use gun with zero recoil, and because of her adrenaline surge, she could aim down sights fast like the angle grip never left. Throw on top of this Ayana, who also brought 3 explosives, and Sophia, whose AR was now considered one of the worst in the game, but also just so happened to have an LMG with 150 fucking rounds. This fucking clown fiesta continued all the way up until Year 7 Season 3, when Ubisoft realized they had completely lost control of the population. So they decided to burn everything to the fucking ground. They nerfed everything. Universal recoil increases, with LMGs getting hit especially hard. Massive nerf to frag grenades, decreasing the range from 5 to 3.5 meters, as well as taking them away from Finka and Maverick. And Ayana lost her Gone 6, bringing her back down to 2 explosives. This patch really brought home they have no idea what they're doing. They made LMGs so bad, what was the point of even keeping them in the game? If they didn't want certain operators abusing them, why not just take them away from those operators and give them to struggling ones instead? Well, like every problem in life, it can be attributed to 2 things: money and anime. They sell skin bundles for certain operators and their weapons, like the team skins and the terrible tie-in skins. That means whatever weapon the operator has when they get the bundle is locked to that character. So even if the operator having a certain weapon is way too strong...
What's the best you can do?
The best I can do is nerf it, period.
Because as we all know, the best way to balance a game is under the threat of legal action. They also made a couple of other fucking baffling decisions, nerfing Thunderbird's spear especially hard. Who would have thought giving a defender an attacker AR, secondary SMG, and multiple types of explosives could be considered a bit too powerful? So another gun is sacrificed in the name of the revolution. Ironically, by trying to make the game less gunfight focused, they would end up creating the most gunfight heavy meta the game has ever seen. This is because, believe it or not, Tom Clancy's The Rainbow Six Siege is a video game. An FPS to be exact. And people play video games to have fun. And using good weapons is fun. By making all the utility heavy operators worse, like taking away the 1.5 for Mute, Cade, and Wamai, and by increasing all the recoil on basically all the guns, players would begin to seek out operators not for their gadgets, but exclusively for the weapons they have. This would be the start of the TDM meta. Ubisoft would continue to taste the rainbow that is lead-based paint by nerfing even more utility-heavy operators, like Sledge and Zoph on attack, and Mute, Aruni, and Malusi on defense, by making them all 3 armors, causing all their pick rates to plummet. These recent changes hurt Mute especially bad. Because while yeah, he was usually played on site as an anchor with the shotgun, you could occasionally use him as a pocket roamer with the MP5K. This gave Mute a bit of versatility, and Ubisoft hates that. Oh, you silly little fucks. Mute's not a roamer, he's an anchor. You're playing him wrong. Make him a 3 armor and take away his 1.5. That way no one will have to suffer from temptation. Changes like these just accelerated the TDM meta. People were already less interested in picking utility-heavy operators after all their weapons got shit-canned. And now you made them all slow and fat, so there was even less reason for people to pick them. And if the defense isn't going to bring as much utility, then that means the attackers can forgo some utility in favor of better weapons. And this update, once again, nerfed Fuse because him and Ace share a bed. I mean a gun. Ubisoft doesn't hate the gays. They're a progressive company with big ideas. They hate women. Like Alibi and Nook, taking away the 1.5 from the X4 Storm because, big fucking shock, people really like with a 1.5. Maybe if more characters had access to a similar amount of firepower as hers, then Nook was probably the most egregious part of this patch. Suppressors had just been buffed and players were loving it, seeing a 10% increase in usage across the board. One character players really loved to combo the suppressor with was Nook. Nook's ability synergizes well with the suppressor, therefore a higher silencer pick rate is not a concern. They say in the patch note about them nerfing her gun. Apparently, it was a fucking concern. As for bullpups, apparently, the mid-season took away the F2's vertical grip and gave Wamai's AUG more recoil, despite the fact that, once again, he was literally the most balanced defender in the game. Wow, players really seem to be liking the suppressor change. Combine this with the loss of the 1.5 in the previous season, and his pick rate and win rate absolutely cratered. But this was the season that they buffed the extended barrel, making it do an extra 15% more damage. I'm sure they won't go back on this in the coming seasons and end up nerfing a bunch of guns that they just buffed. In the next season, they reduced the buff to 12%. But on the bright side, they also went back on the 1.5 change for Wamai. The combination of losing the 1.5 and the recoil nerf caused him to suffer more than anticipated. What did they expect? Seriously ask yourself that. What were they hoping to accomplish? After losing the 1.5, he landed right in the middle of the chart. So what purpose did nerfing his other primaries serve? But don't think they actually gave out a 1.5 without any trade-offs. If you give the masses too much power, you give them the means to overthrow you. Come on, this is basic Machiavelli. So they took away the 1.5 from Capcan and Oryx. That way they could continue to desperately subsidize Tachanka. This was also around the time that history began to repeat itself. You remember that useless character that no one played? Well, this time, it was happening on defense. This was the season that Warden's pick rate exploded. He went from the 7th pick to the 2nd to by far the highest in the space of one season. His skyrocketing popularity was driven almost entirely by the fact that he had the last remaining low recoil gun with a 1.5. The explosion in Warden's popularity was like a fucking signal flare for the rest of the community to abandon all strategy and critical thinking skills. Because if everyone's just gonna run around like it's Call of Duty, why the fuck would I pick a utility operator with a shit gun? So at the same time that Warden's pick rate exploded, Jaeger's pick rate tanked, along with other utility operators like Cade and Wamai dropping. These problems were also exaggerated by the fact that it took away the deployable shield from the popular choices, Smoke and Alibi, and moved it to the unpopular choices, Pulse and Clash. So now there was even less utility stopping attackers from playing hyper-aggressive. Also a small buff for Tachanka, because at this point they're just throwing shit at the wall and hoping that something will stick. Surprisingly, they actually gave out a 1.5 without requiring a sacrifice. Thorn got it, launching her from one of the worst performing defenders to the second highest in just half a season. She settled into the pack over the next few seasons, but it really showed you how much the meta was being controlled by the 1.5 and who had the best gun. And speaking of the 1.5, Warden and Ayana, they had ridiculous pick rates. We're aware of the situation and the issues behind it. Ayana's high presence is mainly driven by her access to frag grenades. Yeah, no shit. Because at this point there were only 4 attackers in the whole game that had frag grenades, and only 2 that people actually wanted to play. So yeah, real fucking shocker that both of them had really high pick rates. In one of the more bizarre decisions they made, they decided to buff Legion, giving him the super shorty, more mines, faster recharge on mine, and damage on contact. Look, I'm all for them buffing operators, and I actually don't mind the change. But why they chose Legion, an operator who'd been performing fine for years, and why they chose to give him the keys to the fucking kingdom is beyond me. And another surprise change, they improved all shotguns by making them more consistent. Phenomenal. Absolutely astonishing, a change to the game that doesn't suck ass. Anyway, back to things that do suck ass, they changed all the game modes.
But why? Why would you do that? Why would you do any of that?
I'm not even gonna touch that, but why can't I spawn peek or do runouts and quick match anymore? Like, the only fun thing left to do in this carcass of a game is dumb shit and casual, and they're phasing that out too. The mid-season brought the very popular Frost change. They also followed up on their threats for Ayana and Warden, trading Ayana's frag grenades for Finka's Gone 6, and making Warden a 3 armor, just like he was on release. And the next season will bring a more definitive solution that intends to address the frag grenade issue. This is them openly admitting if something is good, that is literally considered an issue. Also,
God damn it, why don't you guys ever fucking pick Tachanka?
And that definitive solution came with them sending frag grenades to the Shadow Realm, along with nerfing IQ and Grim. They also remembered that they hate fun, so they removed T-Hunt from the game.
Cuando iba saliendo de mi casa ya me estaban esperando estos pacos culiaos hijos de la...
They nerfed the G36C for the crime of having the highest KD on all attacker weapons. What was the goal here? I'm seriously asking that again. Ash and Ayana are supposed to be the entry frags. And when they do that job well, that's a problem, I guess? They want Ash and Ayana's pick rates to come down, but then they nerf all their competition by doing stuff like ruining frag grenades, causing their pick rates to climb even higher. Like, do they seriously not understand how this works? And with Ash, in the past, they've nerfed her gun, her other gun, her primary gadget, and her secondary gadget. Literally every aspect of her kit has been nerfed, and she's still the top X operator. They've literally run out of things to nerf. So what do they do now? If after 4 years the same overpicked operator back then is still overpicked now, you've unequivocally failed at your goal and you need to readjust your strategy. And that brings up to present day with them once again saying, fuck it, we're burning it all down, with them reworking the attachment system. Honestly, I'm on board with this. The past few years has clearly showed they have no idea how to balance the game in its current state. So I think a fresh start might be the right approach. However, I don't think they're going about this the right way.
Oh no! Oh shit! What the fuck did you do?
First off, the stated goal is just a flat-out lie. Increasing players' options, weapon customization, and accessibility. Of course, because the best way to increase player options is to create one indisputably best loadout in the game, that being the vertical, flash hider, and ACOG. The vertical grip is the only underbarrel actually worth using because the other two are basically useless. 20% faster reload. Wow. Very cool. How often are you in the situation where reloading 20% faster would have been a game changer? If you're getting caught out on reloads that often, you're doing something wrong. And besides,
Switching to your pistol is always faster than reloading.
the horizontal grip does more harm than good most of the time. 5% faster movement speed is nothing, it's barely noticeable. There are very few situations where 5% faster movement would make a difference, but there are a lot of situations where 20% more recoil will. And that just leaves the vertical grip, whose effect has been decreased from 25 to 20%, because some people are still using the suppressor and extended barrel, and we can all agree that that's a problem. But they aren't even that popular. Like, yeah, you see them, but the flash hider is by far the most popular choice. So I don't get why they keep trying to make them less viable options. All this change did was push even more people to use what was already the most popular choice. And when it comes to sights, they didn't like how dominant the 1.5 was. So they just straight up fucking deleted it from the game. And decided to instead replace the dominant option with an even more dominant option. I admit, the ACOG is fun, and I'm glad it's back. But if they thought 1.5 times zoom on defense was considered overpowered, why the hell did they think giving even more zoom would be a good idea? They just changed the default from the 1.5 to the ACOG. And let's be honest, no one's using iron sights. Wow, 5% faster ADS, and all for the low cost of not being able to see what the fuck I'm shooting at. I do feel my vision grows stagnant if left unchallenged. And on that note, changing the size of the reticle for the sake of balance is so fucking stupid. They should not be using how physically hard it is to see things as an element of balance. I thought they spent the last 9 years making the game look worse so it would be easier to see. Just let players customize their reticle, that would actually increase customization. And of course my favorite change from the season, the massive ADS speed nerf. If you couldn't tell by now, I hate them slowing down the ADS speed. A lot of people say slowing down the ADS speed is a good thing because it punishes people who play recklessly, and then it makes the game more skill-based. But I'd argue it actually lowers the skill ceiling. It's for a few reasons. First of all, why is having an aggressive playstyle a bad thing? If someone is really good at gunfighting, why shouldn't they be rewarded for that? Also, not every aggressive play is some brain-dead zoomer swinging you with power of Adderall. Sometimes you just need to go for the aggressive play. No plan survives first contact, and you need to improvise. But now it's extremely difficult to play aggressive, and the person holding the angle usually wins the fight. The problem gets even worse when you consider that defenders holding a pixel peek with an ACOG is almost a guaranteed win. It's funny because in most games, camping is considered a low-skill, brain-dead way to play the game. But in Siege, it's the exact opposite. People who rely on gunfighting are considered brain-dead. And while Ubisoft would like to imagine that every gunfight is a chess-style battle of wits, that's just not reality. The fact is that a large portion of the gunfights are sporadic, where you're not expecting an enemy to be there and you need to quickly ADS. Except you can't do that anymore, so now you're just spraying and praying while slowly raising your gun up. And the guns now ADS so slow that a lot of shots are being hip-fired. On average, both with rifles and SMGs, if you start aiming down sights and shooting at the same time, you're going to fire a little over 6 times before you finish ADSing. So now, if an attacker and a defender surprise each other, on average, 12 bullets are going to be hip-fired at each other before they can properly aim their guns. And even with the fastest ADS option available, the average gun will still shoot well over 5 times. It gets even worse when you consider a gun like the Vector can shoot 9 times before fully aiming down sights. Whether you like slow ADS or not, it's a fact that the longer it takes to aim down sights, the more time will be spent hip-firing. And that means more randomness and more random headshots.
Bro, this fucking Cloud kid, he doesn't even fully ADS when he shoots. It's just all hip-fire shots too.
Honestly, my biggest problem with these changes goes beyond just the ADS speed, and more to the decisions made at large over the past few years. That being, it's just not that fun. It just doesn't feel that good to play. Sure, right now if you have an ACOG it's fine, but if you have to use someone who doesn't have one, it feels terrible. The gunplay used to be so quick and snappy, and now it's slow and clunky. Every gun has so much recoil that any fight for more than like 10 meters is just fucking luck. It's two people spraying a whole magazine at each other and just praying the recoil bounces to the head. The operators in game are supposed to be the best of the best, but they're no match for the awe-inspiring power of 9mm. Like, is this really how they want the gunfights in this game to look? And the reason it's like this, and the reason why Ubisoft always nerfs things, is because they're in an arms race with their own player base. That being over how much the game should focus on gunfighting. Ubisoft wants to maintain a certain level of balance between the gunplay and the gadgets. But the reason why it's so hard to maintain this balance is because over time, the average skill in the player base has increased. That means that more people rely on their own abilities rather than the operator abilities. Meaning that over time, players will naturally gravitate towards gunfighting over gadgets. And once Ubisoft feels the player base has again leaned too heavily on the gunplay, they nerf whatever they're using to try to restore balance. Whether that be a certain operator, the angle grip, the 1.5, frag grenades, a specific gun, you name it. And that's why you hear it all the time.
You're basically punishing them for having fun.
They're getting punished for playing the game the way that they want to.
Because that technique you discovered, or the operator you made, or the attachment you love, or the way you play the game, well, it goes against their vision for the game. But the cycle will never end. It's a Sisyphean task. Because the thing they need to realize is there's a hard limit on how good the gadgets can get. But there's no limit on how good the players can get. People will always improve. They're always going to find new and creative ways to play the game. Players mastering a game's mechanics should be celebrated, not punished. In other games, things like bunny hopping, head boosting, wall bouncing, they weren't intentionally designed by the developers, but their existence raises the skill ceiling and elevates player expression. Ubisoft shouldn't fight the player base on this sort of stuff, because the meta isn't designed, it's discovered. They want Siege to be slow and deliberate with a perfect balance between the gadgets and the guns. But it never will be perfectly balanced. They need to focus on practicality, balance based on how people actually play the game, and not on how you're supposed to play the game. If something is fun, players will naturally gravitate towards it. And that's why people treat the game like Call of Duty. Because getting kills is fun. They made a first-person shooter, but they seem horrified when people treat it like a shooter. You can't force people to play the game the right way. Playing Jaeger might be the right thing to do for your team, so why doesn't he get picked more? Well, because his gun sucks, and that isn't fun. The aforementioned Adderall Zoomer isn't going to suddenly start anchoring on site his Cade just because you nerfed his fragging op. He's just going to move on to the next fragging op. People aren't going to start playing the game the right way just because you dumpster everything popular. If you want people to play the game a certain way, then you need to make playing the game that way more appealing. And this may sound counterintuitive, but if they made some operators better at gunfighting, it may actually make the game less gunfight focused. That's because Ubisoft decided that an operator can either have a good gadget or a good gun, not both. And if you make people choose between a good gadget or a good gun, they're gonna pick the gun. During the utility meta, guns were way stronger than they are now. But despite this, people thought the game needed to be faster and less focused on the gadgets. That's because there wasn't that big of a gap between the utility operators and the gunning ops when it came to fragging potential. The line between a fragging op and a utility op was kinda blurry, and that meant that people were way more willing to play utility operators and bring more gadgets. If they want the gameplay to be more gadget focused, they need to make playing utility more appealing. End of story. But again, this will never be a permanent solution because you can't stop people from fragging out. You can only try to slow them down. And just like how Ubisoft has a particular vision for what the balance between the gunfighting and the gadget should be, they of course also have a vision for how much each operator should be played. That being, they want every operator to be equally viable all of the time. And just like how they handled gadgets versus gunplay, their approach towards operators has been just as heavy-handed. Nerf whatever is popular, while not acknowledging why certain things are popular in the first place. Again, you can't force people to play the game a certain way. They're gonna use whatever they see as fun or useful. Not everything can be perfectly balanced or viable all the time, nor should it be. If everyone had the exact same loadout and gadgets, the game would be perfectly balanced, but it would also be boring. Picking where to consider bad operators and using them in special ways is fun and what makes the game interesting. That's why Glad's one of my favorite operators. He's really niche and doesn't get picked that much, but that's okay because he's fun. Whereas someone like Ashe gets picked all the time because she's useful in a lot of situations. And that's also okay. But for some reason, Ubisoft sees high pick rates as a problem. To compare it to another game, in Counter-Strike, the AK and M4 are the backbone of each side, whereas something like the Bison is the Bison. But Valve recognized that each gun has its own place in the game, and they really shouldn't be competing. Now imagine if Valve decided that everyone using the AK and M4? Yeah, actually that's a problem. We want more guns to be viable. And to do this, we're going to dumpster the AK and M4 to encourage people to try new options. I know this is a bit of an extreme example, but that's basically what Siege is trying to do. Make everything viable all the time. But we don't need everything to be viable all the time. It's okay for some things to be staples of each side and others to have niches or just to outright suck, as long as the game is fun. Just buff the underperforming operators and they'll naturally get picked more. And this also means that the overperforming ones will naturally get picked less. This also has the benefit of giving players more viable options while not removing something they become accustomed to. And you don't run the risk of creating another LMG meta. But as it stands, the current nerf everything strategy has made almost every single operator worse. And you know, it's pretty hard to bring things back in line when you keep lowering the fucking line. They could just buff the operators that are struggling to bring them up close to the average, but instead, it's just a race to the bottom. In a game, everything can be underpowered and balanced, but alternatively, everything can be overpowered and balanced. And people generally like it when things are overpowered compared to underpowered. Think NBA versus WNBA. It's also why Titanfall 2 is the best game ever made. And the most fucked up part about all this is that balance really isn't that important. What actually matters is that the game is fun. Reading through 4 years of patch notes, the number of times you read, "We know this won't be popular," or "This is going to be a contentious change." Because they know a lot of these changes make a lot of people unhappy. And the community polls back this up, often showing the majority of player base is against a change they're making. They focus so heavily on making sure everything is perfectly balanced that they balance the fun right out of the game. The movement is slower, the gadgets are weaker, all the guns are worse, the recoil is way through the roof, everyone ADS is slower, the 1.5 is gone, frags have been gutted, even fun casual stuff isn't safe. No more spawn peeking in casual, classic maps are gone, our lore's been doomed to a life of poverty, and they just ruined the recruit. All for the sake of balance and competitive viability. Which is ironic because given how broken Rank 2.0 is and the absurd amount of cheaters, there's no reason to play this game competitively. But the change they made over the past few years also mean that the casual experience isn't nearly as fun as it used to be. So what does that leave us with? In the past 2 seasons, I've played a grand total of 11 ranked games. Me and my friends joke that it's like we're visiting a family member in hospice care. We just check in every once in a while to see how they're doing. The answer is usually terribly. Sometimes they have their days, but the good days are far outnumbered by the bad, and you know it'll never go back to being the way it used to. I've been working on this video off and on between school and work for over 6 months now, and in that time the focus of the video has changed a lot. Adding parts, removing parts, rewriting and reworking the video so many times that I don't even know if it's coherent anymore. This video has probably been the most demanding project I've ever worked on in my life, and as you might have noticed by the lack of ADHD editing by the end, at a certain point I realized that it was going to drag out forever and I just needed to end it. I still have a lot I want to say, but I don't know when that will be because I'm contractually obligated to drive a forklift at Home Depot. I guess this is the part where I should say thank you for the support on the previous video. I thought it would get maybe 100 views, definitely not 92,000. I guess this is also the part where I should beg for money so I don't have to drive a forklift anymore. Whatever happens, the next video definitely will not be another half an hour long marathon, but I do look forward to screaming into the void.